Welcome back to Historic Investments. Today I'm going to show you two fantastic SIG pistols, but conceptually fantastic because these guns never made it into production. It was SIG's early attempt to develop a smart gun or a safe gun. These guns were denoted as those with an electronic personal locking system. A concept that sounds good but was so impractical so as to be ridiculous. Let's take a moment, look into these guns, and if you like what you see, please like, subscribe, and if you have any questions, please ask. We'll do our very best to answer them. Although the idea of a smart gun is valid, SIG's approach was decidedly unusual, coupling an electronic keyboard to a modified frame in hopes of rendering the gun inoperative when not keyed in by the intended personnel. It was basically designed to provide secure guns for either security personnel or police forces. I mean, although the concept could be carried forward commercially, because it's certainly a good idea that without the owner's express approval, these guns could not be used by an other or maybe an offending party. But anyway, SIG's approach was to construct, and you might be able to tell here, was to make the slide assembly, in this case of a P229, with a completely redesigned frame. And I must admit, this looks like an extraordinarily expensive R&D project. And in the frame, there was a little compartment for an electronic keyboard. And the idea was, when it was time for your duty, you would punch in your pin. And let me just cone in right here so you can kind of take a look at that keyboard. And you can see here some buttons here. We've got 4 buttons with numbers. The first one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And here's the 0. The S is for save and the R is for reset. So you'd punch in your pin, and then you would normally punch in the hours of intended duty. And the kind of the standard hours were half an hour, 2 hours, and 8 hours. I'm not quite sure what the 2 hours would be, maybe to cover somebody's extended lunch, but that's a different issue. And then after the numbers were punched in, the gun would become live. This little diode would light up red, and then this button here would go from safe to fire. And you can see that same kind of denomination was on the other side too. And you can see these guns were in a little bit of a different serial range, since all of these guns, and there were probably between 15 and 20 of them in total, were certainly research and development guns. Here's a different kind of a view. Let me just turn it back a little bit so you can see. There we go, and here's the front part of the frame, and you can see this is where the batteries go in. So you've got a slot here that's a little bit dished, so you could use a coin. You can turn it out, stick your battery in if it's low, and you know the warning lights and the warning flickering is pretty much the same as what we would expect on a lot of other electronic equipment that we would see today. But as you might imagine, this is really a large and clunky frame. It would need a special holster, of course, one that hopefully wouldn't set off the alarms on this electronic keypad. But you know, the thing is, it is just very unreasonably complicated for a gun that you may need on a moment's notice. Sure, the gun would be live while you were on duty, but once you went off duty and say you were carrying the gun home and for whatever reason you needed to use that gun, well, the question is, in the heat of the moment, are you going to really remember your pin? Are you going to be able to, you know, press your pin in a direct and smooth manner? Or is your pin going to get scrambled? Because just like when you tap in pins for, you know, other electronic accounts, if you entered your pin incorrectly 3 times, the gun would be locked up. And that's right, you were completely SOL. So you would have to take your gun to the chief of police, to the head of security, and then they would have not a 4-digit, but a 6-digit master code to unlock your gun. If they lost that master code and you forgot your PIN for any reason, you are really out of luck, because you cannot unlock your gun. You might as well throw it in the garbage can. But anyway, as you might expect, these guns were not particularly greeted with a lot of enthusiasm. This particular type of electronic locking system was integrated into several different models. As mentioned, this is a 229, and here it is. Here's a box that says, again, SIG Sauer P229, and then there's a letter. This is like the first time I actually had to read an instruction booklet to kind of figure out, you know, how to use this darn gun and how to get it to operate properly. And here's a letter that's dated May 2nd, 2000, and thankfully, because I'm not very good at remembering things. Here's the master code and here's the pin. And if I ever forget it, I'm going to have to look back on this video. But in any event, this, as I mentioned, SIG made several models with this flawed concept. And here I'm going to bring in, this is a one of the plastic frame guns. It's one of the SP 2340s. Same kind of thing. It's got a very modified frame, though it wasn't nearly as expensive to make. You can see it's kind of welded up here with a lot of the additions and guts being adjusted or modified to a standard frame. The other one was a hugely expensive frame. This one you can see has been modified. We look at the other side, and again you can see some of the modification taking place here. Again, it's a tool room sample gun. I mean, who has a serial number that's FUMU-03. If we take a look at the front of the gun, again, you got to see that little battery in the front, and this one is not black anodized, of course. It's just got a brass cap, but you can see it's just got a dish slot. So again, the idea is you can use a coin, like who has coins anymore? The question is, can you use a credit card to unscrew it? But I guess that's a different question altogether. This particular gun has been fitted with night sights, the other one standard sights. And if we look at the box, I mean, this is probably, it was just fitted. I'm going to cone this thing out a little bit. This is just the box on hand because you can see it was a 2340 pistol, but it was sold from the SIG factory in this box, which is a 220 box. And what's more interesting perhaps is the label that says this gun was either designed or maybe initially released to the SIG museum before it was sold on April 23rd, 1999. So that kind of pins in kind of a rough time frame as to when these guns were made. This one in early 1999, the other one in May of 2000. But with that in mind, here we have a couple of just really conceptually odd guns. There we go. Guns that you're unlikely to see, but it's certainly something to keep in mind when you're looking at the historical evolution of much more practical pistols. So let's go through a simulation. You finish your duty shift, the gun's completely unloaded, and let me just show you that it's completely functional at this point. Double action trigger, single action trigger, slide retracts properly, and releases in the normal manner. So you now want to deactivate the gun so it can't be used by any unauthorized personnel. So I'm going to hit this twice. Okay, you heard that sound? Now look. Trigger can't be depressed. Hammer cannot be fully cocked. Slide cannot be released. The gun's put away for the evening. Next morning, you want that gun to be operational for your shift. In this case, the code is 1470. So that's a single tap on each of the buttons. Here's the 1470. Okay, you heard that noise. Trigger, hammer, slide. Good to go for the next day. Thanks once again for having joined us at Historic Investments. Hopefully, I know it's pretty unlikely that you're going to see any of these guns out in the wild, but if you do, one thing for sure, make absolutely sure you get the correct pin or the master code, because you don't want to go away having these guns permanently locked up on you. With that, good luck, good collecting.